Okay, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Thank you for being here, whoever you are. I won't beat around the bush at all. If you were here last week, you might imagine that there was some considerable blowback. And a lot of people have been asking me once again, what the fuck, Jay? Why did you do that? And believe me, I've been asking myself that all week long. And when I trace it back, I think I just was insensitive to the topic that I was bringing on the show. I was thinking about things in this very, intellectual and philosophical sort of way. First, I had this conversation with a friend, which just really kind of blew my mind a little bit. I just had never heard those things before, and then I saw that Kachi had gotten attacked by the woke army, and I just emailed her and said, do you want to come on the show and talk about what happened? And I really didn't think about it much farther than that. It just got scheduled on, and then, I've been juggling a million things, and then I jumped on to record, and after we recorded, for me, I still thought that it raised these really, I thought, important philosophical, metaphysical questions almost about gender and sex, and if there's a difference between them. And I thought, well, I want to hear both sides of it. I want to hear from someone who thinks that there is a difference, and I want to hear from someone who doesn't think that there's a difference. And I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I was thinking about my daughter's debate. Like, my daughter's been doing these debates in her school, and I've been helping her with the debate prep. And it's been apparent that whoever goes second gets an advantage. They get to hear what the first person says and then have a chance to rebut it in their remarks. And I felt like it might not be very cool to record with someone before they have a chance to hear what Kachi thinks. So I thought I'll just post Kachi's out, and then I'll get someone to come on to respond. And even after it posted and the emails started to come in, and I started out emailing people back. A few of you got emails from me, but eventually it was impossible. There was just too many emails to come in. So if you didn't get an email from me, I'm sorry, but I did read them all. And even after all of that, I was still in this very intellectual mode of, okay, I understand people feel upset, but what about the substantive arguments? Nobody's answering the substantive questions. That's what I was thinking. And then that really didn't shift for me until yesterday. And I want to speak directly to Ryan. Ryan, I heard what you said on your show, and I feel horrible about it. My friend Ryan is disappointed in me. Ryan was hurt, and I would never want that. I would never want to hurt Ryan, or anybody for that matter. And so to Ryan and to any trans people or not trans people who listened to the show last week and felt hurt, I am truly sorry. I did not want to hurt you. And I want to acknowledge that there were some problems with some things that Kachi said, specifically around children and puberty blockers. I read the emails from parents who have trans children, and clearly it's not that they're just going into one meeting and walking out with the pills. Clearly there's a intense process, and these families toil over making these very difficult decisions to try to help these young people who are suffering. So I intend to have that part of the story here on the show. I always intended to. If I could, it would have been today, but it wasn't able to be today, but it will be here as soon as I can, because I understand that the way that it was spoken about was dehumanizing of the situation. And I have been thinking a lot about that, about why Kachi feels threatened. Because Ryan said that. Ryan said the way Kachi spoke about trans people was as though they are a threat, and we're not a threat. And when I spoke to Kachi, I didn't hear hatred towards trans people in what she was saying. I heard that she was angry. She was definitely angry, and she definitely feels threatened. But I don't think she feels threatened by trans people. I think that it does come down to this question of whether or not gender and sex are different. And let me add that it's not just Kachi. I received a lot of emails from women who felt supported by the things that she said. And these are not right-wing Trump supporters. These are not the person who, if a trans person walks by on the street, they say something horrible to them, or some cisgender white man who is attracted to trans women and feels shame about that and then commits violence against them. These are not those people. As far as I can tell, these are like moms and lesbians and women of all sort. And for them, their gender is about having a vagina. And so when they're told that in order to affirm trans identity, being a woman isn't about having a vagina anymore, that's old thinking, they feel threatened. And again, I don't know. I'm not a woman, and I'm a cisgender man, and I realize people say I shouldn't talk about any of this, but I've put my foot in it, and it's on this show, and so I feel compelled at least to continue to talk about it some. And like I said, I'm happy to have the voices who are more qualified to talk about these things than me on the show, and they'll be here as soon as I can. But from what I got from Kachi and from other people who've contacted me, and again, this is not just it's like a lot of people, they feel that they're being asked to give up something that is deeply meaningful to their identity, and they feel threatened by that. And for a trans person who's not making the distinction between gender and sex, where it doesn't matter if you have a vagina or not, you can be a woman whether you have a penis or a vagina. For those people, as I am coming to understand, when people like Kachi say that, when they say being a woman is about having a vagina and they want to assert that, they feel that their right to exist is being taken away. And then there's sort of like a political identity politics football that gets played around with that pits everybody against each other. And I'm genuinely confused. I don't understand why those two things have to be exclusionary. I don't understand why there can't be women who think that being a woman is about having a vagina and women who think that woman is not having a vagina. I don't understand why they have to be at odds. Again, I admit I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I'm trying to understand. I didn't understand that it was going to be so polarizing and that people were going to feel so wronged. And I know that I am being asked to take it down. And as of this moment, I haven't done that. And believe me, that is my first impulse. My friend Ryan asked me to take it down. So, I hurt my friend and may very well have broken that friendship. And if so, I deeply regret that and will have to live with that for the rest of my life. And And that friend has a request of me. So why don't I just do that? Just, what the fuck, Jay? Your friend asked you to take it off. Just take it off. But I have not done that because when I go to do it, I have this feeling that it's not the right thing to do. Because, for one, I feel like it's like erasing the mistake. If it's a mistake that I've made, I don't want to erase it. Like the way the internet is in 2 months, it'll be as though it never happened. And, all the comments that people wrote will go away with it too. If I delete it, it all goes away. And it's part of what I do with this show. And I've gotten criticized for it again and again because, I don't script shit. I don't do show notes or all this shit I'm supposed to do to be this responsible journalist. And that's because, for me, in many ways, I'm trying to trick myself and the guests that come on as much as possible into letting down our guard enough to actually say what we really think. And when you do that, when you really let your guard down and you say what you think and you record it and then you just let people listen to it, shit is revealed. It's all right there. All of my biases and my narcissism and my privilege, it's all right there. And then I have to face it. I have to deal with that. And I have to read all the emails that come in. And it just feels like deleting it would undo that process or something. And I know a lot of people feel that I need to take it down, that anything less than that is unacceptable. And at the same time, I know that if I do that, all the people who felt supported by it will feel that their voice has been silenced, and then the other side will feel that they've had a victory. I am very sorry that people feel hurt. And again, I'm very happy to have those voices here to say that and have equal opportunity to access this platform. I just am not comfortable with saying that Kachi should not be allowed to say what she said. And that if you do, you're a hate monger. I don't see how deciding who gets to be heard and who doesn't get to be heard is going to help us address these issues that we all need to figure out together. And that's where I'm at. And I realize that might not satisfy everybody. I don't think I can. I don't think I can satisfy. I imagine everybody is going to be a little bit annoyed with me right now. And I can debate in myself whether that was a dumb idea. Maybe I should have just not done it at all. But I did do it. And so now it's out there and it happened. And I want to let that be an opportunity for learning and for growth as much as I know how to do. So that's where I'm at with it right now. And I'm just going to have to leave it there, I think. We do have a talk to hear today with Kathryn and Flynn. She has a book that she wrote called Teach Kind, Clear Yoga. And we're going to talk about yoga methodology and pedagogy. Much safer territory, even when we disagree. But it was a pleasure to connect with Kathryn. I think her book offers some interesting stuff for us to consider as yoga teachers. So we do have that to listen to today, and I'm glad for that. Before we get to it, I do want to just mention, if you are a yoga center owner right now or a yoga studio manager and you're dealing with your management software, if you're dealing with Mind Body Online, or maybe you're putting together something new, you might want to take a look at today's sponsor, KarmaSoft. Longtime listeners know I've talked about KarmaSoft for years. It is the studio management software that I used when I had a yoga center, And I've been saying it a lot over this last year that, if there's one thing we've learned, when you have like necessary apps for your business, you want to deal with companies that you can deal with, that aren't these like massive, huge corps that you can't get somebody on the phone when you need to. And I think that KarmaSoft is a company that can give people individualized service that you can't get from those other bigger companies. So again, if you're somebody who needs some studio management software right now, I think you might do yourself a favor to go check out KarmaSoft. Go to karmasoftonline.com. Okay, and other than that, I think we will just get to it. I will touch base with you on the other side for a moment, but let's go ahead. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Kathryn and Flynn. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing okay. How are you, Kathryn? Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. I'm good.
Yeah.
My kids in childcare. We had pancake breakfast as a treat, and the chickadees found the new feeder. It's an exciting morning around here.
Nice. Yeah, I was actually just watching Jessica Garner on Hot Ones. I don't know if you've ever watched that show on YouTube, Hot Ones, where they have to eat really hot wings while they're trying to talk about themselves. It's pretty funny.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's very funny. But she is in this new movie called Yes Day. And basically it's based on this book, I guess, about like letting your kids have a day where you just say yes to everything they want to do. And like if they want to have like ice cream for breakfast, they get to have ice cream for breakfast. So it's like one day a year or whatever, at least, where they get to do what they get to. You have to say yes to anything. I don't know. I haven't read all the rules. There's more parameters than that. I only just heard about it. I haven't even read the book, but I kind of like that idea. Just now when you said pancake breakfast, I was like, oh yeah, we need to have a yes day around here too. My two kids are down there on their Zoom meetings right now in school.
We're all on Zoom. My little guy, he's going to be 4 this summer. So I feel like we're in a very good window to explore a yes day, because for him, the ultimate joy is being chased and not being caught. He never wants to be caught, and he'll be quite upset with you if you do.
So it's got to just be near misses, right?
It's constant near misses. And he's getting faster, over the years, the few that he's had. Initially, you did sort of a like slow paced jog to pretend that you were, moving quickly. And now he can really boot it. He challenges me. Sometimes he catches up behind me.
Yeah, they get bigger. I've got an 11-year-old, and I'm having to come to grips with her coming into new stages of life and getting older.
I find the 11-year-old stage, I found it really exciting when I worked with kids as a young person. My parents were both educators, so I had a lot of opportunities to flex some teaching skills as a teenager by volunteering in various capacities. And I found that 11, 12, like 10 to 12 age group really fun, because they're so capable. They can really participate in interesting ways, but they're not, puberty hasn't totally ruined their confidence yet.
Right. Although, I mean, it hasn't, but there's definitely this creeping feeling in her. And like her and her mom had a real like heart to heart in a way they hadn't before just recently, where she expressed some things for the first time, just feeling like maybe she's not good enough, or just, and it had to do with like her parents, which is crazy. We've been really careful about like her consumption of media and everything, but it's baked into the culture and it gets into their brains.
Yes. Yeah. You have two girls, don't you?
I do. I have a 11-year-old and then a 6-year-old.
Oh, okay. So busy in different ways.
Indeed. But it isn't our children that brings us together. It is our common love and practice of yoga. It is a pleasure to meet you. I did only have a brief while, as you know, to try to like look through some of your book, which I did do. And
it's really good.
I'm glad that you said that. That's really cool. You know, honestly, I like the way you did that, because a lot of times I'm a writer too, and it's very easy to just be self-effacing. But if you like what you did, you just say it's good. And it is good work. It's called Teach Kind, Clear Yoga, which already you win me over with your title. But I guess the thing that jumped out at me right away, just to say to you, is a little bit of feedback, since this is the first time we're meeting, and it hasn't come out yet, has it? Or is it out?
No, it's the first print copy is on its way to me. And, as much as we'd like to pull the trigger, I feel it's prudent to actually look at a print copy. So hopefully by the time this goes to air, it'll be ready for pre-order.
What I would say is my first impression at looking, I was like, oh, I get this. It seems to me a very common impulse for someone who's made yoga like a life pursuit. At some point where you feel like you need to get it down, like you need to get down what your understanding is and what the techniques that you're using, and it also seems like maybe you've trained teachers too, because that voice is in there. I don't know if that's true or not, but it certainly seems like the book is also is a lot for teachers. And I guess what I thought was, I really see something in your book that is, I think, a similar progression or evolution that happened for me, and I think happened for a lot of people. And just to give you an example, and then I'll let you speak, I swear, is I have this teachers class that I do every week, where I have this group of teachers that we have a conversation, and they're teachers from all over. And just last night, we actually had just a conversation around the idea of alignment, and like, who teaches alignment, and what does it mean to teach alignment? And is it telling people what to do with their bodies, or is it like somatic inquiry, you know? Yeah. And it just really stuck out to me that when I think back to earlier years of when I first came into practice, alignment meant something very specific, and there was one right. and not everybody could do it, you know? And it does seem like that's changed. And it does seem like a lot of us have landed on this idea of like a kind and, as you put, clear yoga. So I just wanted to bounce that back at you and say that to you, because it does think that you've put your finger on a zeitgeist in your work. Yeah.
Thank you. That is a lovely thing to hear. And as much as I joke, like, it's really good, you know, my editing style is probably akin to my teaching style, which might be characterized by "and another thing" every time, because writing takes so long, and there are so many people producing great work that often I would go back to edit what I had, and I would, as we should, refine what I had already set down, because I'd already accrued a slightly different perspective, heard another voice. So it's always a process of refinement. But the journey, like you said, you know, I was reading, I'm going to share something. This is very typical of me. I'm going to share something and then I'm going to get back to it. No. I was listening to a talk with a guy, I think his name's Adam Grant, and he wrote a book called Think Again. I haven't read it yet, but I was listening to him speak, and the book is about questioning our perception, and how when beginners start out, as many teacher trainees do, there's a lot of insecurity. You know, they really doubt themselves. They doubt their ability to, especially in teacher training, when people are so comfortable in their yoga practice by this point, and they've done downward dog 1,000 times, and then it comes to the first time to actually express how to do downward facing dog, and they find they can't easily translate their experience of practice into words. And so initially it's lacking confidence, but what he talks about is that there's an effect by which you accrue some skill, and then your confidence goes up a lot faster than your skill does.
Yeah. It feels good to be a teacher.
Oh my goodness. I've been teaching for 12 years this year, and I think I have some karma to resolve from those early years where like a lot of us, I started teaching a lot. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, and yet it was a different era. I was handed, I think, 8 classes at one studio.
Right.
And so that confidence went up dramatically. And I distinctly remember feeling like I had no time for Warrior One. Warrior One was a waste of time when high lunge was available to you. And now Warrior One, my cues around Warrior One include your back foot, which is kind of pointing forward.
I don't even do Warrior One this day. We could get to that. We get to the simplifying of practice. But I guess I'm curious because you mentioned your parents earlier as being educators. And I also read that your mom was a yoga teacher when you were younger. And I came to yoga, like nobody I knew growing up was into yoga, but your mom was a yoga teacher. So how old were you when you saw your mom teaching yoga?
Yeah, so my parents are really special people. We're very close. And both seekers. My mom's like a yogi Buddhist, and my dad's a like shaman Buddhist. And my dad's actually co-leading a silent retreat with me, hopefully, depending on how things go later in the
wild.
year.
I can't ever I mean, my mom passed, but my dad like never could really get on the wavelength. I mean, he appreciated and respects what I do, but he doesn't really go there.
Yeah,
that must be cool. Did you practice with them when you were young?
So no. So there, people hear that my parents and I are spiritual peers, and assume that I had, I think, some kind of like Californian upbringing. And I grew up in the Greater Toronto area. I grew up in the suburbs. My parents were very typical, middle-class educators, but both seekers in their own ways. And my dad also has a very intimate relationship with nature, which is why we're a bit obsessed with birds in my family. We do a lot of birding. And my mom, to cope with anxiety and insomnia, she was a spiritual seeker, but she also, like all of us, she wanted to suffer less. And so she discovered yoga, and like all of us, caught the bug and did her yoga teacher training. And I was in my mid-teens, and there's, my poor mother, if you want your teenager to do something, not recommended that you do it. All of a sudden, my mom, there were chakra banners around our house and like funky t-shirts, and crystals weren't so much a thing yet. So my mom started practicing when I was in my mid-teens and teaching. But like a lot of young people, I would occasionally go to class with her, but I really rejected the practice. I just really believed in the ability of my mind and philosophy. Super jazzed about university. And it wasn't until I wrecked my knee that I finally decided it was time.
How'd you wreck your knee?
Oh, I was running, likely with extremely poor form. And I struggled intensely with body image. I really wanted to be thin, and running facilitated that. but running with poor form, running without self-compassion, a lot of self-criticism. I ran myself basically the vastus lateralis, and I'm gesturing at it on my right leg.
Let me ask you a question about that. Like, how much of it do you think it is that you ran with bad form, and how much of it is how you were feeling about yourself while you were running, or can you even separate those two things?
Yeah, I don't know that you can separate those two things, because I run now. I run now, but there is a levity of mind when I run now, and there's a levity in my form. I'm not fast. I'm slow. My husband can pass me at a fast walk.
Yeah. Well, I asked
but it's
that,
the internal benefits.
Yeah. Well, I asked that because there's definitely, in my experience, these days where, like, I can do a particular movement or activity, even if it's just taking a hike. And on one day, it's fine. And it's great. And I feel great from it. And I can do the same exact activity almost exactly the next day. But if my mind is in a different place, my hip joint will aggravate because I get pain there. Yeah. And then I just wonder about it. And sometimes there is like technical things that I can absolutely observe. Like there's like a range of, if I squat too far down, it'll tweak a little. Like I know where to set a boundary for the movements often. And so that's definitely like a technical thing in terms of form, like having good form. But at the same time, I sometimes think that it's more about what's happening in my mind frame than the form.
Yes. Yeah. I was talking about this in a course with folks who are already yoga teachers or avid practitioners. And the course itself was on core and pranayama. And I was talking about how some forms of pranayama they're so sharp, they're so strong, they can create such an effect that to not be present during practice is to really dramatically increase the risk. And that's true of any sharp, strong practice, whether it's those are Ayurvedic terms. Whether it's running or weightlifting or really sharp pranayama, the higher the risk, the greater requirement of presence.
I think that's right. And I also think it's sometimes not just presence, but like sentiment. Like if I'm relating to my body in a way that is caring, even when I'm challenging it, as opposed to when like I'm using the physical activity to like beat myself up or something. Yeah. There's like it's subtle. It's like you wouldn't see it from the outside. Like it can be technically precise on both days, Yeah. It's a subtle thing that happens on the inside while you're doing it, I guess.
And that's, it's another reminder that what we see on the outside, as I was going to say, what we see on the outside does not necessarily reflect what's going on the inside. Mm-hmm. And I really feel it's important to watch your classes for signs of sort of a lot of stress, excess stress. Yeah. Because no matter what you're doing, that's going to give you a lot of information about the appropriateness of what you're teaching for the skillfulness of the people in the room.
Right.
And I think that's true. However, there are lots of folks who are very good at being really hard on themselves. And so they can do challenging things and relax their face at the same time.
That's right. I did it for a long time. I made it look really easy, but at the same time, you wrote something that I really appreciated, and it was about learning why you do something, and that being like a way that the practice becomes more about like discovery and experimentation. And that seemed pretty pivotal for me. Like at some point there was all these things I was doing, these forms I was doing just basically to like look good and impress other people. Like, and it worked. Like I was thought to be advanced because of it.
Yeah.
But at some point I had all this pain that I was just like, I thought was opening. And at a certain point, when I really started like, why am I doing this? Like, this doesn't, you know, like people say I'm advanced and I still feel like shit. There's something wrong about that, you know? And then at a certain point it does change and it's like, okay, it was about experimenting and discovering things. And that was a shift. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, you know, the challenge with yoga postures, which in a lot of what I produce on the internet and in the book, it might seem like I don't teach yoga postures, which is far from the truth. I teach a lot of yoga postures. I just see a lot of benefit in adding in more movement within foundation. So I joke to you in an email that I sometimes say I teach advanced rolling around. But I love yoga postures for the reflection that they offer, for the experience of the subtle that they offer. However, when we cling to this idea of advanced postures, it emphasizes this idea of destinations in practice. And those destinations exist in our bodies and our minds. And so this idea that being in a certain posture is a level, a destination of attainment after which happiness will arrive, and contentment.
Or something that you want, whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah. We really believe that there's something around the corner that we can't see. I mean, it's always both, right? It's and both. Practice is effective. You know, practice is effective. But I guess back to that question of why, like some people get into yoga because they've got like physical pain and they hear it's good for that. But then yoga also has like purposes that have more to do about, like you were saying, perception and a sense of self in life and how you choose to be in the world.
Yes. Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of people conflate pain with progress because they're so used to pain, like, however it manifests. Although a lot of them struggle to slow down, right? Well, I remember the first time I did a yin yoga class and it felt like it was specifically tailored to torture me. I had some incredibly unkind thoughts about the teacher. You're describing me. I didn't even recognize pain as pain for a long time. And I was very determined to like become enlightened. So I was very motivated. And I'm just like a bit of an A-type personality by nature. So part of me undoing some patterns that were really hurting me had to be slowing down and simplifying. And like I said, I want to get to that, but I sometimes joke, it's like my practice is essentially like a 12-step program for A-type personalities. It's just like, can we do simple, slower things and not push so hard or whatever? Yeah. I'm trying to ask you a question, pardon me.
Go ahead. I love it. Please
try and let myself be interviewed, but
no, this is not an interview. You ask me whatever you want. I love it.
When you say you're an A-type person, I'm really interested in this term.
Yeah.
Are you someone who upholds rules?
No. Is that what A-type means? I always thought A-type meant more of just like somebody who tends to err on the side of extremes and pushes themselves very hard and is very kind of like like hard on yourself and very high energy, like up late at night.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I'm not a night owl. I think I put everything through an Ayurvedic lens.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hear A type and I think
like
Pitta
Vata.
dosha.
Like, wouldn't that be like a Vata type?
Vata is air and space. So Vata is your creative team.
Right.
And then Pitta dosha is fire and water.
Yeah,
and
maybe that's a little more
Pitta
fiery.
dosha.
Yeah, I'm probably.
It is, and it's the transformative element, right? So fire is the ability to take raw material and turn it into something usable. And that could be at a nutritional level. You eat something, you make use of it, but it can be at an informational level too. And so from who I've observed seems to make successful teachers, there seems to be a lot of Pitta dosha because they can take information and transform it into something usable.
Yeah, but to your point, the greater challenge for me is being simpler and kind. Like it's easier for me to work hard and push to like be soft and simple has become the greater and more fruitful challenge, at least for me.
Well, I would love to know if you've gone through this journey in your trainings, because a lot of people associate A types with upholders, rulesy people, which
I don't.
I think agreed that we've both moved away from or never really were.
I'm a rebel against all rules most of the time. That's not true, but like I'm not one to necessarily feel like you have to stick to rules.
Yeah, there's got to be some pretty good rationale behind them. Yeah. There's got to be a conversation.
Yeah, if you can convince me, and I'm open to be convinced by all means, then I'll be happy to.
Yeah,
I think also I was curious to ask you to just take a little bit of not like a side route, but one of the things that I noticed, like in your book, you do start with more of like a philosophical or historical foundation for things, which makes sense because it's always like, well, where does all this stuff come from? Mm-hmm. And there was one little thing, and just a random thing that I saw, was that you referenced Madame Blavatsky. Mm-hmm. No one ever that I know references Madame Blavatsky. And I certainly came across those writings at a particular time. And I can't remember, I'm sorry, I didn't write it down exactly. You associated it with like some early origins or some ideas in the sutras. Like, what do you know about Madame Blavatsky?
Yeah. I mean, so I teach, I'm far from an expert. Wikipedia knows a lot more than I do even. However, I really feel, and I say this in the book, I really feel that if we're going to have an authentic, honest relationship with yoga, we need to learn about yoga's history. It is the right thing to do, but like any relationship, you learn about the person or the practice within which you are in relationship. And so, I've studied enough books and enough concepts in my schooling and in my yoga that I like to follow threads. Speaking of sutras, I like to follow threads. Mm-hmm. And how yoga landed in North America and how it was popularized had a lot to do with Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society in New York in the late 1800s.
Yes, it did. Have you read those books, like the 14 Lessons in Yogi Philosophy, like the Yoga Ramacharaka books?
No, I haven't read those.
Oh, you should check those out. They're published by the Theosophical Society in like 1904 or something like that was the first one. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, because I found those books at an early time, and they were sort of like really, I don't know, they were real jump off points for me. But to your point, it seemed to me like that was like, when we talk about yoga coming to the West, they talk about Vivekananda coming to the World's Fair. but the Theosophical Society certain to see be the ones to kind of translate that out or continue that after he left or whatever, or they played some role for sure.
They did, and their intention was to discover the nature of reality on the various planes of manifestation. And they also had, one of their guiding principles was that all beings were equal, regardless of, class, race, culture, gender, which is really progressive for the era. But Madame Blavatsky, she was crazy impressive. She spoke 7 languages, and was really my impression is that she was quite a scrappy person. She just plagiarized a lot.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I have heard people speak about, what Michelle Goldberg wrote that book about Indra Devi, and she mentioned the Ramacharaka books and Blavatsky, and kind of talked about it like it was hokum or something, that it was this new thought movement that was based in magical thinking or whatever. And it's interesting.
Yeah, I have read that they were into ectoplasm, which is, I believe, ghost residue.
What's ectoplasm? What does that mean? I don't know.
I think it's ghost residue. If a ghost has been here, it's ghost poo, essentially.
I see. Ghost goo. Well, it's interesting because you wrote something about there being a history of magic in yoga and Buddhism. And I think that there is. And you also offer a lot of science in the book. And they don't have to be exclusive of one another, I don't think. But there is sometimes, even especially these days, I've heard people kind of anytime you entertain the idea of magic, it somehow means that you're not based in science or logic or knowledge. So where do you put magic in your mind? How do you frame it so that it can exist in harmony with your understanding and appreciations of the science?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. I talk about magic, again, partly to have a more authentic relationship with yoga. There's this wonderful story of the Dalai Lama giving a talk, I believe in the 70s. And he says, does it make you sad to know that there are 17 levels of hell in Buddhism? Does that make you sad? And it's such a cheeky question, but the idea that there was ever a concept of a hell in Buddhism would be shocking to a lot of Westerners who are interested in mindfulness, MBSR, Buddhism, because it's been so stripped of magical, mythical elements. And both systems are replete with it. There's some incredible stories about how tantric yogis, to gain the favor of a local monarch, would basically show them a really good time, bring them up to the temple, and there would be a lot of substances and a lot of women to use the perception and the experience of magic to gain and curry favor.
But that sounds like a K Street, booze them up and bamboozle them. I'm talking about in life, there is magical occurrence, or there's things that science can't necessarily explain.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, you mentioned that I begin in philosophy and then we rove over to science. And if there's one thing that I'm trying to convey in the book is that the enormity of all of which is relevant to the practice of yoga doesn't need to be intimidating. It can easily be, but it doesn't need to be intimidating. But everything we look at, perhaps we need to soften our grip on some of it being factual, knowable, rooted in the material, and some of it being...
If you are hearing this message,
then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.